The EU, in the person of Mr. Juncker, is playing down what happens in Poland right now. What happens in Poland is very serious, as Poland is rapidly becoming an authoritarian state. Well, I say, then it's clear. The Treaty for the Preservation of Democratic Structures within the member states of the EU is not worth the paper it was written upon. This undermines the credibility of the EU as a guarantee for freedom, democracy and human rights. A hope for many, like the people in Ukraine. In other fields, the credibility of the EU as an effective organization was also undermined. A few examples. Apart from some weak sanctions, the EU was ineffective in defending the European peace order in Ukraine. As a result, it made Vladimir Putin more effective. The EU is ineffective in controlling the influx of refugees from the Middle East and Africa. It even had to beg for help with Turkey, which up to now showed to be an ineffective step, as there still is no decrease in the number of refugees coming from Turkey. The EU was ineffective concerning removing perverse incentives in the banking world, leaving the door wide open for the next financial meltdown. The EU was ineffective in solving the Greek crisis, even after more than 5 years. In all these major crises of the last years, the EU has shown to be ineffective. This cannot go on like this. People will lose all confidence in the EU. The idea behind the EU remains as wonderful and necessary as ever, and the alternative of going back to the old Europe is as unattractive and dangerous as ever. But still, I start to doubt the concept of the EU, because in the end, every organization has to deliver, and in the crisis of the last years, the EU simply didn't. By the way, the fact that the EU constantly fails is not something I blame the EU Commission for. I believe that they are people of goodwill, but they simply lack the power and means to be effective because the nation states refuse to give them the power and means they need to be effective out of a fear for losing national sovereignty. The national states prefer national power over nothing instead of shared power over something. It is a task now for the Commission to make the European people aware of the reason behind the ineffectiveness of the EU. Be honest about it and have courage. I think the people will understand.